praying within a chalice to remind ourselves of the fragility of our lives and the power of our connections to each other, to other Unitarian Universalists, and the people that we love. Would you like the chalice, please, Adria, as I share the words of Angela Herrera? Don't leave your broken heart at the door. Bring it to the altar of life. Don't leave your anger behind. It has high standards and the world needs vision. Bring them with you, and your joy and your passion. Bring your loving and your courage and your conviction. Bring your need for healing and your powers to heal. There is work to do, and you have all that you need to do it, right here in this room.
Thanks, Elizabeth. If you've ever been one of the nearly 2 billion passengers a year on a commercial flight, you know this scenario. The physical crush of boarding is winding down. Somebody's shoving a huge suitcase into the overhead bin, even though they know it doesn't fit. A young woman hits you in the face with her backpack before plopping into her seat. And a mother folds a stroller and hands it to the flight attendant before carrying her newborn up the aisle. As she moves toward her seat, she can see people silently praying, "Please don't let them sit near me." But a few people, probably mothers themselves, give her a wry smile that seems to say, "I know how you feel." If you're a mother yourself, you want her to know that the disturbance she thinks that her baby is about to cause isn't going to be anywhere near as bad as she worries it will be. At least it won't be so bad to you and to the other parents on board. But as she sits down in her middle seat and settles in with her baby on her lap, she can tell that the guy next to her in the aisle seat is annoyed. He won't even look at her. He just immerses himself in his laptop and makes sure he takes up both armrests. And that kind of scene is only the beginning of what motherhood is like. Because motherhood is hard. And Mother's Day can be hard. It should be all smiles and flowers and chocolates and greeting cards and special dinners. And often it is, and it's great when it is. But there can still be sadness. In times when we're reminded of losses and hurts, maybe even abandonment or neglect or abuse. Our mothers are imperfect people engaged in an impossible vocation that most of the time is all joy and no fun. Some of us are grieving the loss of children or never having had children, or the loss of offspring to death or disassociation. And today, as with every Mother's Day, we all arrive each feeling our own feelings, knowing that it's all going to be okay. We have each other, no matter what. So let's remain seated and recite together our covenant, which is printed in the order of service. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. So this is a time now to share our joys and concerns so that we may bear witness to one another's lives and fulfill.
Thank you, Mike, for that piece. It was beautiful. It was beautiful, and your modern day translation of it is just what my mother taught me, so thank you. have my talk today in several different versions in case any technology screws up. So I'm going to try to do it on my phone. So, stitching together a family. I grew up as the second oldest in a family of 5 children. Divorce, remarriage, my mother's ill health, and the death of my brother when I was in high school meant that life was not always easy. I was eager to move on and not too sure that I would ever marry and have children myself. But marry I did. And 9 years and 2 children later, I found myself a single parent living in Rhode Island with no family close by. And now, much to my delight, but without intention or plan, I share the grandparenting of 7+ young children. When I was first divorced, my daughters were 7 and 3 years old. Though my birth family was always emotionally close and supportive, they were not in a position to help me in any day-to-day way. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers became my in-state family and support. They picked the girls up at daycare when I couldn't. They included us in their celebrations. They took care of me when I was sick and made me tea when I was blue. And they let my daughters know unequivocally that they could depend on them too. We were not alone. 9 years later, after my divorce, I met Jeff, a divorced father of 2 girls. We have been together for the 26 years since, but for various reasons, we didn't live together until 4 years ago. And that is another story. The 4 girls became close during their middle school years, and we had many adventures together and separately. I'm finding that if I move around to engage my eyes with all of you, I lose my place. That's one disadvantage of this arrangement, perhaps. Jeff's wider family became our family too, and his girls were welcomed into summer visits with my extended family. It was wonderfully hectic and full of fun. My daughter's father remarried, and in later years, the 3 step-siblings and half-brother were also welcome in our home. We made it through the high school years, and all 4 girls went off to college, mostly in state because money was never plentiful in either household. College graduations were a thrill. Helping kids move in and out of various apartments was a chore. My daughter Rachel was the first to get married, and like most things in her life, she planned it without much input from me. But I knew I had to do something to recognize this very special event and to recognize the broader family that we had built. And what better way to do that than to create a quilt that everyone could contribute to, a quilt that could wrap her in all that love, that could be a gigantic, warm, virtual hug. I sent out packets of material pieces, fabric markers, and instructions for creating a specific size square that I would later piece together. Packets went out to her future wife's family too, and I eagerly awaited their return. In some cases, I sent out almost completed squares for people to sign and add a message to. And you can imagine, getting all those squares back and assembled into a quilt was no easy matter. But I excitedly did it again for Claire 3 years later. And that is the quilt that you see here today, hanging on the wall. Oops.
They should be able to see
There
it
you
too,
see.
right?
Okay, so now you can see the quilt.
Okay.
Okay. Our family has grown to include 3 sons-in-law, and 1 daughter-in-law, and 7 grandchildren who call me Grammy, or Mimi, or just Liz. For 4.5 years, it included 2 foster children whom Rachel and her wife had intended to adopt and who have recently connected with us 5 years after returning to their birth mother. In my heart, they are my grandchildren too. I have remained close to all the families who were my village for so many years. I have forged new friendships and made new ties, including with all of you here. My children are stitching together their own families, including their children, many relatives, many friends, and the neighbors where they each live. My daughters learned from me, and I am continuing to learn from them every day. Family is who you choose to love. There is a lot of room for love in our hearts, and when we choose to open them fully, the rewards are immeasurable.
Please rise now as you're willing and able. Imagine being an early human, spending nights in caves or under trees and spending your days constantly moving around, seeking food. Once in a while, you're able to catch a small animal and eat it, but most of your energy, most of the calories you consume come from plants. Humans haven't yet cultivated delicious, palatable produce. Carrots and lettuce and apples don't exist in the way we know them now. So you and the people in your community are foraging for edible but very tough and very fibrous food. You eat leafy greens and their roots. You get a bit of tartness with a hint of sweet in some berries that are hard to find because you're competing for them with birds. Then one day there's a fire. A scorching, hot, fast-moving fire that tears through the forest so fast that animals can't escape. The scene is terrifying, the kind of thing that will later be the very description of hell. And it smells delicious. The dead, charred animals you discover are tasty. But they're hard to come by. You have to wait for one of those scary fires and then venture into it and risk your life to retrieve the meat. But it's worth the wait and the risk because that food makes you feel satisfied. Anthropologist Richard Rangman from Harvard University has studied chimpanzees his whole career. And what he has been observing is a whole lot of primates sitting around all day chewing. Gathering vegetables and chewing burn a lot of calories, and the food doesn't have a lot of calories to begin with, so they spend most of their day gathering and chewing and gathering. It doesn't really give them much time to do much else. Like his colleagues, Rangman believes that eating cooked animals allowed our distant ancestors to spend less time gathering and chewing and more time cooking and thinking, inventing, building. Harnessing fire, Rangman and other anthropologists believe, is what allowed the brains of humans to grow, allowing us to make the evolutionary leap from primate to Homo erectus. And after millions of years cooking food, domesticated animals, and hybridized crops, it's not only normal, but it feels natural for us to cook. Cooking is what separates us from primates and other animals. Cooking, anthropologists say, is what makes us human. Sarah Blattford Hardy is also an anthropologist and a primatologist, and she has a complementary theory, which she shares in her book, Mothers and Others, The Evolutionary Origins of Mutual Understanding. In it, she shares a story like the one I opened with, humans boarding a plane and having different responses to a mother and infant. She says that scenes like those put us in positions of using our peculiarly human, empathic attitudes for theorizing about the mental states and intentions of other people, which she calls our species' gift for mutual understanding. Cognitively oriented psychologists refer to the ability to think about what someone else knows as having what they call theory of mind. Now that sounds a little more complicated than it is. And this is what theory of mind is. Children can look at pictures of people, laughing, crying, concentrating, feeling physical pain, expressing anger, suppressing rage, any of that, any complex emotion. And they can understand those emotions from photographs without anybody explaining it to them. And we all know joy when we see it from a very young age. It's pretty fascinating when you think about it, this theory of mind. So cognitive theologists, with all of their curiosity, have designed very clever experiments to determine at what age human children acquire this ability to recognize the unspoken emotions of others. And they've also used experiments to figure out how non-human animals, even very young ones, do the same thing, and how early an age they can start to do that. Human and non-human animals, it turns out, are both really good at recognizing emotions, especially the emotions of other beings that are in crisis. So Sarah Blaffer Hardy knows that many animals will come to the aid of other animals, even animals of different species, when they're in crisis. And thanks to the advent of video cameras and the internet, we've all seen it. Dogs rescuing a puppy hit by a car on the freeway. A sow nursing a farrow of piglets and that one motherless lamb. A troop of baboons chasing a tiger away from an injured young antelope. Animals of all species have an incredible capacity to empathize with and protect the smallest and most vulnerable of any species when their lives are threatened. And within a community of homogeneous species, many animals even share the responsibilities of protecting the young. A mother penguin can spot her own baby amidst thousands of seemingly identical juveniles, and she knows that every adult in the huddle will look out for her chick. Humans, though, are excellent at recognizing more complex emotions beyond responses to danger. Humans have much more advanced theory of mind than any other species. So Dr. Hardy wanted to see if other species could further develop their theory of mind. So she conducted these studies with apes in which the youngsters lived in a really novel environment. Instead of being cared for almost exclusively by their own mothers who were in relationship with other mothers, these apes were cared for by a group of mothers. All the mothers somehow shared all the responsibility for all of the babies. And what she learned was that young apes raised by a community of mothers had improved theory of mind. They were better able to recognize and appreciate the more nuanced emotions of others. They had more capacity for empathy in situations that weren't life-threatening. They were better at expressing their own needs. And they became better mothers themselves because they were better at understanding the needs of their young. Apes with better theory of mind are more likely to survive, thrive, and evolve. So based on her studies, Dr. Hardy has come to believe that sharing the duties of motherhood, not cooking, is what made us human. Without sharing those responsibilities, even with the ability to harness fire, she says we never could have made the evolutionary leap into humanity. So to recap, the vast majority of anthropologists believe that we humans could not be who we are without the capacity to cook. And Sarah Blaffer Hardy, that is a really hard name to say. Sarah Blaffer Hardy also believes that we couldn't have evolved without sharing the nurturing responsibilities of motherhood. So as I said, the two theories are complementary. And I say they're complementary not because women, mothers, have always done the cooking. I say because women have not always done the cooking. In the Odyssey, which is one of the oldest pieces of literature in the Western world, Odysseus and the men were cooking. They were cooking and serving, and not just for one another in the battlefield, they were cooking and serving for their families. And that shouldn't be surprising because in the oldest societies, men often had the dangerous task of controlling the fire. You can still see it in societies today that continue to live the ways they did millennia ago. For the Martu people of Australia, it's an unwritten law that food is never brought to the community, to the family, if it's raw. So that means the person, whatever gender they are, who hunts for and harvests, also cooks and delivers. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? That we humans have taken such leaps in development over the millennia. We changed our diet such that our brains were able to expand, giving us the time to focus our energy not just on survival, but on creating and beauty and religion. We started to think about who we were, where we came from, and where we wanted to go. We created art in every form in the communities and economies that supported it. We developed the ability to see a greater spectrum of color because we had the time and safety to stop and notice and to reproduce and even describe with words the colors that we were experiencing. We began to allow whole extended families, a whole village, to raise our children, trusting one another with the nutrition and safety and education and even religious formation of our most vulnerable. It became over time an expectation that everyone had a role in caring for the young. And all of these changes, they happened slowly, over generations, centuries, millennia. All because cooking and motherhood made us human. It was a slow, quiet revolution that changed our prospects for the future. Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist monk, writer, theologian, mystic, poet, social activist, and scholar of comparative religion, once wrote, "We are living in the greatest revolution in history, a huge, spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race. Not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep, elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been. A revelation of the chaotic forces inside every body. This is not something we've chosen, nor is this something we are free to avoid." And we really are living in a time of incredible revolution, especially in the last 50 or 60 years. And each year that goes by, it becomes harder to ignore. Sometimes it's overwhelming, sometimes even scary, especially when we think about what we're doing to this planet. It's really scary when you think about the ways in which our understanding of identity and gender are being challenged, while the challengers of the status quo are being persecuted by legislation and violence. But maybe this revolution is what is going to get us to make the next big evolutionary leap into being more human. Maybe this revolution, like the one begun by cooking meat and sharing the responsibilities of parenthood, will get us to a future that we could never have imagined in the past. And maybe that we can't even imagine right now. The people who are challenging all the old binaries will be the people who show us the new way, the new destination. We can only make that revolutionary, evolutionary leap if we do it together, with everyone taking responsibility for and caring for each other, especially the children. Less than half of humanity has the gift of the ability to give birth. But we all have a responsibility for tending to that gift. And that's what we're reminded of on Mother's Day. Mothers can't carry all of the burden alone. They can't be solely responsible for the survival and evolution of our entire species and our habitat. We all have to help, with more than just our patience on airplanes and our alliance in maintaining reproductive health and freedom. Mothers need us to share our compassion and empathy, our theory of mind, if we're to survive. And we can. So let's all rise now and open our gray hymnals to number 301. Touch the earth and reach